I care a lot about the international component of this, but I think one of the things that gives us credibility to address it is the stuff we're doing here domestically at home. And let me just share with you my experience, and I think, Mr. Abramowitz, you started to touch upon this, and I wanted to dig deeper on it. In our work on this, both in my time in the state legislature and here, one of the things I've run into is this conflict. And I don't, by the way, what I'm about to say in no way should be taken as an assault on the intentions of the people that are involved in this, but some folks in law enforcement and interested parties who struggle with the notion that the young ladies and others who are being trafficked are actually victims as opposed to perpetrators. I've struggled with trying to explain to people that in fact these folks are not willing participants in a criminal enterprise, even if they are 21 or 19 or 20. In essence, it's hard to explain that to people because when you interact with a victim, they've been so emotionally battered and so psychologically battered that they may act like a willing participant, but in fact have been trapped by those circumstances. I'm probably not explaining it right, but I think you get the gist of it. And it's been difficult to interact with some in law enforcement who want to have the ability to treat them as perpetrators, in essence, to put them on the stand, to force them to testify against the pimp or the trafficker, and more importantly, to be able to punish them. And it's gotten really difficult to overcome that with some groups. I was hoping we can dig into that a little bit deeper today, not just through your testimony here, but when we leave here today, because I think it's one of the things that's holding us back from making more progress. There was a state legislative initiative this year in Florida that created a safe haven, basically a safe harbor for people who had been trafficked, and we ran into some resistance from law enforcement that was ultimately overcome about not being able to put the victims in jail. And treat them as willing participants. I think you get the gist of what I'm getting at. So you've probably encountered that as well, and I don't know what we can add to the debate about that today. I'd love to hear your insight on that, and I hope we'll concentrate more on that, because it's really one of the things that's holding us back from getting even more people on board.
Mr. Senator Rubio, I think this is an issue that really harkens back to the very beginning of the efforts to combat human trafficking. When I was on staff in the Foreign Affairs Committee and we had our first meeting with the Justice Department to try to discuss implementation, this issue immediately came up. These individuals are part of the conspiracy, and we need to turn them against their traffickers so that we should withhold assistance, we should withhold various things until they're willing to testify. And I think one of the pernicious aspects of that particular attitude is that it makes the victims more afraid of law enforcement. So the very thing that they're trying to accomplish, which is to try to bring the victims out and then perhaps, if they can, be as brave as some of the women behind me and come forward with their stories, then actually prosecute them, they're actually diminishing that. Now, I will say that we have made strides in this area. I think that the whole notion of a Victor Center approach, which was the sort of the buzzwords that were created in the Bush administration, which they have really been trying to implement, have made a difference. Yet, there is still a prosecutorial imperative to try to get the bad guys. And that creates an incentive to try to turn these often women, but also men and boys, to try to provide testimony when they're not ready for it. And I guess I would say that the real challenge in this area, and I think you felt this when you were in Florida, is that even though at headquarters you do see evolving approaches on this score, and they really do believe this. When you get out in the field, I've talked in candor with DHS, and they'll say, yeah, we do have field agents who still just see these people as, illegal prostitutes who need to be thrown out in the country, right into their hands of their trafficker back in Mexico, who will then be re-trafficked right back across the border. So I think that's the real challenge now, is try to get state and local law enforcement and also in the field, people understanding this. That requires training. And I think with some of the work that we're trying to do to try to bring civil society in closer partnership with law enforcement so that they can try to really educate them as to the needs here.
Sorry. To add to what you were just saying, which I feel very strongly about, I also think it could be helpful, too, to have support for survivor leadership that can help with that education. Many of us who, speak about this issue, we have secondhand information or third-hand information versus we have survivors that have first-hand information, and we have a lot of survivors out here who are willing and very capable to lead us in these efforts as well. So I think that could also be an aspect of our education and learning, continue to learn what this is about and what it looks like.
I totally agree with that.
We work internationally, and domestic issues are not my expertise, but I've had the good fortune to talk with many of my fellow anti-trafficking friends. And one of the issues that troubles me greatly is the fact that something like 80% of the children who are picked up in prostitution on the streets come out of the foster care system. And the foster care system is literally training ground can be literally a training ground for children to be pimped out. And they're abused in foster care. They're on the street. They get picked up. They go to juvenile detention. They're abused in juvenile detention. When they get out, they have no place to go, and they have no home, and they are back on the street again. And there has got to be a stop to that immediately. If jail is the only safe place for a child who's had crimes committed against them, then something is very badly broken. We're working at IJM in collaboration with Polaris Project to try to get state laws passed that would require this safe haven approach that you referred to, Senator Rubio. New York has one. They're hard laws to pass because they cost money, but it is giving a child from the streets a safe place to live and and caregivers who love them, and trauma-focused care, and getting them health care and mental health care and life skills and schooling. You don't get that in juvie. And the only way to break that cycle is to start treating child victims as exactly what they are. And we're not doing it in the United States. And do please take a look at that foster care system. There is legislation out there, and it deserves a look.
Thank you. My time is up. My only comment, and you might be able to help me with this afterwards, is it would be great, and maybe it exists, if there were for lack of a better term, a speakers bureau of survivors available that we could use to interact with both folks who I think need to be convinced about the victimization aspects of this, but also for educating young people who might be susceptible to. So I don't know, maybe that exists already if there's such a place, but I'd love to know about it. Thank you.